Former President Donald Trump may have come under the DOJ's radar once again, but the FBI's raid of Mar-a-Lago seems to have boosted 45. A new Morning Consult poll shows Trump enjoying the top spot of possible presidential picks to run in 2024. 71% want him on the ticket and 58% would vote for him. That's 4% more than in July.
But popular Fox News host Laura Ingraham thinks many Americans might be ready to turn the page on Trump. Speaking on Lisa Booth's podcast, she said, quote, "The country, I think, is so exhausted. They're exhausted by the battle, the constant battle, that they may believe that, well, maybe it's time to turn the page if we can get someone who has all Trump's policies, who's not Trump," unquote. But Briahna, it's kind of ironic that somebody like Laura Ingraham would be saying that they want somebody with Trump's policies when Trump's policies are kind of an incoherent mishmash and not necessarily what Laura Ingraham had herself supported 6 years ago. Like if you put Trump's current platform, whatever you want to say that Trump's platform is today, and line it up next to what Laura Ingraham and the kind of modern conservative movement believed 6 years ago, you wouldn't actually see a ton of overlap. And it's more Trump's sensibility that they like. So now they're going to change all of their policy preferences, or some of their significant policy preferences, without getting the sensibility. I'm not sure that squares.
It's not clear what the objection actually is to at this point. I mean, the idea that the good part of Trump is the policy, I think you're completely right. I remember when he launched his reelection campaign in 2020, he posted, like a paragraph. All of these Democrats were racing to prove that they were the better person on healthcare and taxes and all of these issues. And Trump posted a literal paragraph that was completely without substance and nobody seemed to care. Fair enough, we get it. But what's this other piece? What is the ephemera that makes Trump so compelling? I think that people are a little bit missing the point. The idea of capturing what Trump inspires in people without it being actually Trump, looking to figures like DeSantis who are Trump-like insofar as that they beat the same culture war drum in certain respects, but don't have that kind of Teflon Don ability to parry all these insults, to demand fidelity the way that Trump did, to come out unscathed from scandal after scandal because he was so apologetic. The sense that people have that Trump is honest, not because he's necessarily telling the truth, but because he's saying what he wants to say in any given moment without being controlled by handlers. That's a really unique quality. And it's interesting to see people like Laura Ingraham, who perhaps are tired themselves of having to defend Donald Trump as he gets deeper and deeper into some of these legal quagmires, kind of conflating that with policy. Perhaps it's just an out for her and a way for her to explain why she's kind of over Trump without herself crossing the big man himself.
Right. And Ron DeSantis, didn't spend 10 plus years, as a kind of reality TV star where he played a CEO. Like he was in 20 plus million people's living rooms on a regular basis, where he was getting this star treatment, where he was the boss. He was a global celebrity for decades before that. That gives him unique and kind of irreplaceable characteristics that somebody like DeSantis can try to, like you said, mimic some of the culture war tropes, but can't pull the whole thing together. And so the question for DeSantis is basically, can you take over the Trump mantle just by being a jerk to liberals? Like, is that enough? Just by owning the libs? And I think it will feel empty to people in the end.
Well, Robbie makes this point that something that DeSantis does is basically outsource some of his more Trumpian sentiments to his comms agent, and that he is able to get these sentiments out there in the world while still having a certain degree of plausible deniability and clean hands, as it were, that makes him palatable to more traditional conservatives who might be over Donald Trump's shenanigans. And I think there's probably something to that, but Ron DeSantis on a national stage, I think, is largely untested, at least from my perspective as someone who is not as obviously embedded in conservative media. I would have a hard time picking his voice out of a lineup. But I wonder, Ryan, how much do you think Laura Ingraham's statements on this podcast have to do with what we learned about her kind of private correspondence with Donald Trump on 1/6? and her warning that she was giving to him behind the scenes, don't do anything that looks like you're inspiring an insurrection, and feeling kind of implicated in that and concerned about being further implicated the longer and longer Donald Trump is on the front stage of American politics.
I think some of that, and also I think there's some resentment. Like and there's been reporting on this, that she has felt burned a lot by the way that he would call in regularly to her kind of male co-hosts, but very rarely would call into her show, and she would get frustrated by that. What am I, chopped liver? I've been I have good ratings. I'm here too, and so I think when you create those level of kind of hard feelings among people, that's fine when you're on the rise. But as you start to kind of recede and there are openings, then all of those knives are gonna come out. Now, I think that how this FBI raid unfolds determines a lot of this. I think without the FBI raid, ironically, Trump was kind of finished. He was fading, and I think both Republican voters and the Republican establishment were coming around to the idea that he was heading off into the sunset. That this, I think, has changed the calculus for them, for Trump, for everybody. So it matters how it plays out, obviously. But there is a path here for him to kind of make a return.
Were you surprised at all that there was this kind of uniformity of response from conservatives about the FBI raid? Because you definitely could imagine a world where some people said, I'm going to reserve judgment, see if he actually did something wrong, or took this opportunity to really kind of shiv Trump metaphorically. It could be an opportunity for, say, DeSantis to say, hey, I'm the uncomplicated version here. I'm the uncomplicated option here for you. But we haven't seen that at all. The entire party, it seems, has been very much in lockstep. Was that surprising to you, and to what do you attribute that?
I think once it was clear that there was going to be space, there was going to be a lack of knowledge about what the raid was about, that could be then filled by whatever wish casting people wanted to throw in there, then I wasn't surprised at all that they were able to jump in there. If it looked immediately like this was something related to, let's say, some massive like Saudi corruption that linked in the Jamal Khashoggi killing and Kushner's $2 billion investment that he got from MBS, let's say it looked like it was something like that, then I don't think you'd have a lot of Republicans coming in. They'd be like, you know what, this is the kind of thing that we didn't like anyway. This is our opportunity to kind of shove this guy aside and move forward. But once it became clear that, and who knows, maybe it is exactly about that, and we just haven't found out. Unlikely, it seems like at this point. But once it became clear that people were going to be able to fill in their own gaps, then you're like, well, now it's a battle, and it's tribal, and it's the deep state and MSNBC against us, and so they're gonna rally, and they don't want to become the next Liz Cheney.
Yeah, well, Trump's up in the polls because of the FBI raid. Biden's been having a good little week, having passed some legislation and generally staying off camera. And the predictions for midterms are looking a little bit better for Democrats than they have in the past. What's your feeling over under on how the last month's events are going to pan out in the fall?
It's the FBI raid is such a wild card. Before the FBI raid, it seemed like there was a significant momentum shift towards Democrats. You also had this recent report in the New York Times that Republicans are pulling back a significant amount of spending in Senate races in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Arizona, which reflects both some fundraising challenges and also challenges from their incumbents. All of them. Blake Masters. Not incumbents candidates, Blake Masters, Ron Johnson, and Dr. Oz just running kind of the worst campaign anybody's ever seen. And so, that combined with Democrats actually doing something, getting this Inflation Reduction Act passed, I think people underestimate, that the power of being seen as doing something. Like even if it didn't work, say in the 1970s when Richard Nixon was throwing the kitchen sink at inflation, he was just creating all kinds of different commissions, rules, executive orders, talking about it constantly. Price controls, like getting what Clinton used to call getting caught trying. and it looked like Democrats weren't even trying, and that was deeply demoralizing the Democratic base. You had that 6-week stretch or 2-month stretch after the leak of the Roe v. Wade overturning, where they were just completely flat-footed, doing utterly nothing. Everybody's just walking away from this pitiful excuse for a party. Now, with Kansas, rejecting that kind of abortion constitutional amendment, and with them actually doing something, there was momentum. But yeah, the FBI thing, I think, throws it for a loop. How do you feel like the winds are shifting at this moment?
It is really difficult to say. I am a little bit hesitant to buy into some of the kind of celebratory tone that I'm hearing from some traditional liberal sources, just because I think the tail on these victories tends to be relatively short, because Democrats don't stick the landing and continue to sing their praises in a way that feels substantive. Also, some of the arguably most beneficial parts of the Inflation Reduction Act, some of the things that relate to health care relief for Americans, which is a very high priority, don't come into effect until years from now, which I think is a real own goal and missed opportunity. And I'm concerned that by the time midterms come around, you're going to have people mostly just still thinking about the fact that they didn't get those stimulus checks that they were promised, that student debt still hasn't been canceled, and potentially the moratorium will have been lifted by that time. And we might be in a very different media cycle. But of course, we will continue to follow that story and polls around Donald Trump's popularity and other potential 2024 Republican candidates, and give you more Rising after this.